Hello again everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share my lifelong journey and experience with the furry community and how I started by knowing nothing around 8 years old to being 23 and owning a fursuit. Turning the clock back quite a bit, I think around 3rd grade of middle school I was first introduced to an online social platform called IMVU. Yes, the one that now owns Fur Affinity and is unapologetically capitalizing on the furry user base. IMVU is very similar to Second Life, but less about roleplay and more about accessorizing your character with all sorts of questionable fashion choices. Anyways, I was introduced to IMVU by my sister when she said it's essentially multiplayer Sims, which had me right on board because at the time I was playing Sims on my family's cruddy computer for a while now. So, prepubescent me lied about being 13 or older when I signed up, and the first thing I did was make the most goth avatar that I could. Even to this day, I still really enjoy that aesthetic, but not as insanely busy and loud as I did back then. This was the first time I was able to talk to strangers online and actually make quite a few friendships over the internet. A couple years had passed, and I get my own first computer, which was this super chunky laptop. On here, I remember typing on YouTube how to get a girlfriend on IMVU, and I came across a video with this person in a cool wolf avatar, and it blew my mind that you could really be anything you wanted online. Later on, I guess I eventually came across the term furry and went to different chat worlds with that tag, and the people I were meeting greeted me with open arms, and I was continuously making more friends with ears and tails. As I approached my teen years, I started to ask myself more questions about my feelings, and on the internet I was able to talk anonymously with very accepting people, as furries generally are. This helped me naturally come to terms with my identity and sexuality, and I never felt as oppressed as I probably would have been without the internet, and knowing there were more people like me in the world. Across 8 years of using the service, IMVU introduced me to furries, the LGBT community, and more friends and relationships than I can count. One of the friends I met on there in middle school I still occasionally text to this day, and I hope she gets to see this call-out post. I personally must have spent like $500 or so over the years on IMVU's currency to make as many different outfits as I could express myself with. In that whole time though, I never actually formed a persona or identity I stuck with for more than a couple years. One moment I'm a snow leopard, the next a lemur, and my online name went through a big rotation of different words I thought sounded cool and edgy as hell. A pattern that did arise over time though was most of my characters being monochromatic and sort of dark looking. I feel like this is gonna play a role later in my story when I talk about how Nesu came to be. As all great things do, eventually my time with IMVU ended somewhere in high school where I just got bored of the platform and more interesting games came out that took my time. I was still heavily invested in furry culture, but it never became a part of my real life, at least not for several years where I was working out of school and making minimum wage trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. One thing I did know though was when Valve started talking about virtual reality headsets becoming a thing, was that I was going to get one and get lost in the metaverse. I pre-ordered a Vive with a huge chunk of the money I had and was absolutely amazed at all the cool little indie projects that came on it in the platform's infancy. A year or two would go by before I heard about another program like IMVU but in VR called VR Chat. The game became a meme overnight and it drew a lot of people like me to it, just waiting for something like this to come along and change how people interact online forever. My first objective in this world was to find something anthropomorphic because I wanted to tell everyone online that yes, I am a furry degenerate and I'm ready to pretend to fursuit around a bunch of anime women. While I found a couple licensed characters, I also managed to find a world where a bunch of hyena avatars were, and that's where I finally found the community I was looking for. We're slowly reaching present time with the story, but there are so many people I met in that hyena world that darn hyena created that I'm talking to practically every day now. Anyways, I'm now a young adult talking to other furry members of the community, and a lot of them had their own personas and characters, and I was starting to feel the pressure to have a way to represent myself with my own persona. I had already had the username Nesu picked out. In an earlier video on my channel I mentioned a musician from where that name came from, but I was sure this was the name I wanted to use. I was browsing Reddit one day when I came across a post on r/furry of the edgiest cat bleeding pink out of his mouth, and it reminded me so much of Danganronpa, which was one of the best game series I've ever played. I started to use the image as my Steam icon, but I had to legally have this character, so I messaged the original artist, Femurs Lemurs, and he was happy to make me a free reference sheet and do all the changes I wanted to Nesu, even though I still paid him in the end with a tip because his art is phenomenal. I really felt complete having a persona to go by, and in the past couple of years I've commissioned like 4 different 3D models to use in VR chat as him. People started identifying me as this character, and I've made so many great friends through VR chat and presenting myself as this weird cat thing with horns. Later on, the thought struck me. I was watching fursuit videos since I was 8, and it's always been a dream of mine to be able to do that. I was at a point where I had enough money saved up from working entry-level jobs to commission a fursuit of my own, but my parents had no idea how deep in this rabbit hole I had gotten into. Anytime something furry was on my computer or phone, I would always tilt it away from them, and I'm sure they must have thought their son was doing some shady stuff online. I eventually found a fursuit maker that was open for commissions, someone who had just left their job to start making suits full-time, Tullius Costumes. Without telling my parents, I sent an insane amount of money over PayPal, and the next day before I went to work, my dad was asking me about it. I was so nervous and shaky that when I finally came home, I wrote about a 3-page description of what being furry is and what it means to me, so hopefully they wouldn't rip my head off when they made it home after dinner. I'm very lucky that they were able to understand it was a big deal to me, and amazingly that was that. After a long time, thanks to coronavirus, my suit finally made it to me, and I think I've reached the peak a lot of furries consider for being invested into the fandom. I really look forward to the day America gets its sugar honey iced tea together and I'm able to go to conventions and meet more members of the furry community and the friends I've made online over the years. So there you have it, a comprehensive look at the journey I've taken to get to this point of making YouTube videos with a giant expensive mask on my head for anyone to enjoy. Thank you for sticking through it to the end, and if you want to add me on VR chat and maybe I can see you virtually, even though I might be a little anxious and hard to talk to at first, feel free. Hope you have a wonderful day.